We begin with growing Republican opposition to the Trump administration's efforts to silence dissenting voices. Now, Senator Ted Cruz is blasting the FCC chair for threats he made related to ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Look, I like Brendan Carr. He's a good guy. He's the chairman of the FCC. I work closely with him. But what he said there is dangerous as hell. And I got to say, he threatens it. He says, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got to say, that's right out of Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, nice bar you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
Wow. And let's not forget that when it comes to free speech in this country, this is the pledge made by President Trump to all Americans during his inaugural address in January.
After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again.
And now, exactly 8 months later, we see through the actions of Trump and his administration that when he made that pledge, he was apparently not speaking to all Americans, but to those in his base, that they should be free to say whatever they want, but not those who would choose to criticize them. And if your speech does not fall in line with what they deem appropriate, then you could see yourself put on a list and see pressure placed on employers to fire you. Or, as we've seen play out, with threats from Trump and the FCC to revoke the licenses of those on television that say things they believe are not nice.
I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negatives. They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. They'll take a great story and they'll make it bad. See, I think that's really illegal, personally. When somebody is given 97% of the stories are bad about a person, that's no longer free speech, that's no longer, that's just cheating, and they cheat.
Joining us now, New York Times reporter Jeremy Peters. He is also an MSNBC contributor and staff writer for The Atlantic, Adam Serwer. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining us on the weekend. Jeremy, what does it mean that conservative Republican senator from Texas, Ted Cruz, is criticizing the FCC chair, not just criticizing him, going all Goodfellas on him?
Exactly, and working on his mafioso accent.
Yeah, right. I mean, trying.
Well, I give him credit. You know, he's a guy who memorized the Constitution when he was a kid and used to travel the country performing the recitation of the various amendments. So Ted Cruz knows what he's talking about on this subject, is my point. We will see how much of an outlier is. My guess, judging from the way that very few Republicans and conservatives in the podcast sphere and broader right-wing media world have responded, they are pretty much saying, good job, we're happy to see Jimmy Kimmel go. But the exceptions are folks like Ben Shapiro, who the other day told his audience, look, this is concerning because, you know, these podcasters have their own media enterprises. Yeah. They're smart enough to know that when the shoe is on the other foot and the other party is in power, this would be a very dangerous precedent to set. But there aren't that many of them speaking out right now because there is a chill over speech on the left and on the right at the moment. Yeah. People are afraid to speak up if they, like Ted Cruz did, if they think that there is something amiss here. And if you are an expert in the Constitution like Ted Cruz is, how can you look at this and think anything but,
for Republicans, the current trajectory raises concern.
when the Republicans are out of power.
Because at some point, that is what's going to happen. Adam, I want to go to you. You wrote something this week. The Constitution protects Jimmy Kimmel's mistake. And you write, the Trump administration does not subscribe to the theory that the Constitution protects speech opposed by people in power. For a long time, Republicans have adhered to a definition of free speech that could be simply summarized as conservatives can say what they want and everyone else can say what conservatives want. That is now the policy of the Trump administration. My dad was in the Army, and when I was a kid and learning about the Civil Rights Movement, I came home and I was like, wait, so you fight for the rights of people who would hate us as black people? And he said, yeah, my job as someone in the Army is to fight for the rights of everyone in this country to do whatever they want and to say whatever they want, even if it's against me. And that has always been my understanding of the First Amendment as a kid. But help me understand now how the Republican Party finds itself on the opposite end of that. That it's no longer, it seems, about allowing people to say whatever they want. I remember just a couple of years ago, they were, folks on the right were complaining that, they couldn't joke about anything. They couldn't say anything without this quote unquote woke mob coming after them.
Well, I want to say two things. One, the history of black people in the United States of America is the defense of principles that were not applied or extended to them. Mm-hmm. And that, is particularly true of black Americans who fought and served their country in the Army.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
The second thing I would say is that over the past 10 years, there has been a slippery conflation of private criticism with censorship. So yes, it can often feel overwhelming when people online are mad at you or criticizing you, and this was sort of treated as censorship. But censorship is what the government does. Right. When people are trying to silence you, that's censoriousness. And the solution to that is more speech. The solution to government censorship is not more speech because the government is preventing you from speaking. And these people simply believe that you should not have the right to oppose them politically. They don't believe that you should have the right to make fun of Donald Trump. Quite simply, they don't believe you should have the right. They think it should be illegal not to like them, fundamentally. And that requires a level of state control that is a complete anathema to the Constitution and to the conceptions of freedom behind the Constitution. That said, we have a long tradition of
Republican opposition to the Trump administration's crackdown on dissenting voices is mounting, with Senator Ted Cruz delivering a scathing rebuke of FCC Chairman Brendan Carr over threats tied to ABC's indefinite suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Cruz, a Texas Republican, called Carr's podcast remarks, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, dangerous as hell," likening them to a mafioso extortion scene from the film Goodfellas. That's right out of a mafioso coming into a bar going, "Nice place you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it," Cruz said, praising Carr personally but condemning the tactic. The backlash stems from Kimmel's Monday monologue criticizing the MAGA movement for politicizing the fatal shooting of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, inaccurately implying the shooter was affiliated with MAGA. Affiliates like Nexstar, the largest U.S. station owner, refused to air the show, deeming the comments strongly objectionable. Carr's intervention raised alarms about government coercion, especially given Trump's long feud with late-night hosts. Trump celebrated CBS's July cancellation of Stephen Colbert's show, predicting Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon were next for their no talent and negative coverage. This unfolds against Trump's January inaugural pledge. After years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents. 8 months later, critics argue the administration targets only non-aligned voices, pressuring employers to fire critics or threatening media licenses. Trump has mused about revoking outlets' licenses for 97% negative coverage. They give me only bad publicity or press. That's no longer free speech, that's just cheating. New York Times reporter and MSNBC contributor Jeremy Peters noted Cruz's stance as rare among Republicans, with few in right-wing media or podcasts echoing it. Exceptions include Ben Shapiro, who warned his audience of the precedent: when the shoe is on the other foot and the other party is in power, this would be a very dangerous precedent. Peters highlighted a chill over speech on both sides, with conservatives fearing future reprisals but largely silent now. Atlantic staff writer Adam Schwerer, author of a piece titled, "The Constitution Protects Jimmy Kimmel's Mistake," argued the administration rejects constitutional free speech protections for opposing views. Republicans, he said, long defined free speech as conservatives can say what they want, and everyone else can say what conservatives want. Schwerer drew from his father's army service, who taught him as a child that fighting for rights includes those of adversaries. "My job is to fight for the rights of everyone in this country to do whatever they want and to say whatever they want, even if it's against me." He decried the conflation of private criticism with censorship over the past decade, noting solutions to bad speech are more speech, not state intervention. Historical precedents include the late 19th century destruction of anti-lynching journalist Ida B. Wells's newspaper for challenging racial myths. Now, Schwerer said, the right justifies suppression as retaliation. We have to censor the left because they were censoring us first. Yet, the goal is preventing opposition from regaining power, targeting liberal organizations and critics to ensure perpetual dominance. Peters pointed to MAGA's newfound cultural cachet through purchasing power, enabling deplatforming accusations despite controlling government branches. Republicans accuse media of Democratic collusion, ignoring their own history, like Trump's staff coordinating with Breitbart on immigration. The victimization narrative persists, bolstered by Fox News and podcasts, despite evidence of influence. Contradictions abound. In 2022, Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller tweeted, "If the idea of free speech enrages you, then I regret to inform you that you are a fascist." In May 2024, Kirk posted, "Hate speech does not exist legally in America. All of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free." Schwerer called these statements of intent, now inverted to weaponize the Justice Department against foes. The divide on the right, he added, hinges on whether Democrats will ever hold power again, hence the rush to entrench control. As threats escalate, from FCC fines to RICO probes against hecklers, the administration's actions test First Amendment resilience, evoking McCarthy-era fears. With few GOP outliers like Cruz speaking out, the chill deepens, raising questions about democracy's